Thank you so much for coming out on this lovely Friday morning to hear about our anthology upcoming. So today is going to be a number of things. We're going to read you some of our work, and then we're going to have a discussion about what environmental writing means now and for us, and we're also going to tell you a bit more about this project that has brought us together that we're all working on, which is an anthology of poems relating to climate change from Aotearoa and the Pacific. So this is a really cool thing that's happening for us, and we just got Creative New Zealand funding even to pay our writers, which makes it all the more worth submitting. It's an anthology of poems by anyone, any of you with a connection to New Zealand or with a connection to the Pacific Islands, who's writing sort of in any way about things that relate to climate change. So this can be any number of things, right? It can be imagining what the future will be like for your children or your grandchildren. It could be thinking about the impacts that our own lives and our own actions have on the wider world that we live in. It could be thinking about the way other creatures or ecosystems or, places that we love will be affected by changes in climate, changes in sea level, weather patterns. Could be poems of vast extremity, the things we're seeing, these increasingly intense and frequent storms and wildfires and flooding. There's a lot of really visceral and material stuff that's involved in writing about climate, and there's also a lot of stuff that's kind of quirky or kind of, I'm thinking of like the hot girl summer signs at like the youth protests. I'm thinking of, the way that people are finding humour in the situation and are writing in all kinds of ways with hope and with despair, with anger and frustration and with determination. So yeah, we'll talk to you a bit more about the project and how you can submit a bit later on to keep you interested. But it's going to be published by Auckland University Press, and our submissions are only open for a short time. So if you haven't sent us some stuff already, you might want to start thinking about it now. So I'm going to introduce the panellists now, and do so through a question. So first of all, I'm Rebecca Hawkes, and my book, Soft Core Cold Sores, in AUP New Poets 5, came out last year. This is essa ranapiri, a fantastic writer whose book Ransack also came out last year. This is Jordan Hamel, recent New Zealand Poetry Slam champion and international competitor, and this is Eric Kennedy, whose book There's No Place Like the Internet in Springtime is also fantastic, and I believe there are copies for sale. So I'll ask our writers now to talk a little more about themselves, and especially just tell us about your writing, who you are, what you're doing, and also how you came to writing about climate and environmental matters. I think it's probably easiest if we just go around the circle.
Kia ora koutou. My name's essa ranapiri, as Rebecca said. Who am I? I whakapapa to Ngāti Rokoa ki te Tonga, Waikato Tainui, Highgate in England, and Clangun in Scotland. I'm forgetting some, but my relatives aren't here, so they can't be angry at me about that. Wow. How did I come to write about the environment? I think if you're in the world at this point, it's really hard not to think about these things. Well, unless you're privileged in a certain way, or in a certain kind of bubble. And then also like thinking about like the land and the whenua and connection to it. There's all this stuff that's happening to us and it that I find very hard to ignore. And it's, I don't know, I think it's increasingly seldom that this state of the world doesn't find its way into my work in some way. Yeah, it's kind of terrifying, but I don't know. Yeah, I think Jordan, you should say something.
Kia ora, I'm Jordan, as Becca said. I'm excited to be here. How did I come to write about climate stuff? Honestly, it's probably, I mean, like Essa said, how can you not, I guess, is probably the first thing. It's always just kind of loitering menacingly, like just off screen, I feel like, in everything you do. And so it's very hard to ignore it. And then I think, especially in the last few years, seeing like the upswell in young people who are obviously taking this on and realizing that, you know, it's their future that's been fucked. So they're like, well, we have to take this on ourselves because no one else has. And I think more or less just as a response to that and just sort of like trying to tautoko what like all these amazing sort of young people were doing and like sort of taking up that challenge. And like, yeah, everyone should be doing this and we should all be writing about this. And like, it's just like youth leadership kind of showing the way. And I think that translates in such a good way into writing. And yeah, and that's why it's a good festival to be at. And yeah, that's all I've got to say for now.
I should say that, yeah, I agree with what other people have said about, like, how could you not, I guess? Like, it does seem like, how could you not? But, I mean, for me, increasingly I've started to view writing as it's not a non-political activity, let's put it that way. So, to me, I'm a climate change activist, like I do stuff with XR and we work very closely with like Fridays for Future, School Strike for Climate, people like that, like people like some of the amazing people in this room, I'm sure. And in terms of like imagining a future that is actually what we want rather than what we have, it's very difficult to imagine not trying to write about stopping the climate emergency and sort of general anti-capitalist stuff. Like it's just... I used to be more of an aesthete. I thought writing was just like fancy words, and I now think that is an impossible position, irresponsible, and yeah, so I'm delighted to maybe belatedly realize that we can actually do stuff in writing that maybe actually matters.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that thing, yeah, about we all live in the world, it's hard to ignore the fact that the art that we're making is shaped by the world that we live in and our understandings and our experiences. And it's quite cool. I think we might go into this a bit more later on about sort of the role of poetry and of art in dealing with, you know, massive like social issues and as a form of activism and as a way of creating joy as well. Like I still write primarily because it's something I love doing, but environmental things come into my writing because those are the things that I care about, and that's what really matters to me, and also the things that I find beautiful, the things I think are worth protecting and immortalizing in these ways. But at the same time, it can also be a way of making an elaborate joke about things that are really stressful. And I'm going to read you some elaborate jokes now. So buckle up, babies, because we're going to do a bit of a reading to get more of a sense of who we are as writers ourselves, sort of coming into the editorship of this anthology where we're going to then be curating other people's work as well. So this gives you a bit of a sense of like the very different things that we do in our own writing and how we explain things to ourselves. But yeah, so we're going to stand up to make it more of a separate performance rather than just like sitting in the chairs reading to each other. So bear with. It's me, but now I'm Jordan. I'm going to read you from a lockdownish time, one that I've written during the residency while I've been in Dunedin, and one from the book. So, I'm going to start by taking you on a cute trip to the zoo. When we can no longer bear each other's habits, we go to the zoo. Admire its resolute conservation values in the face of, everything. The happy otters wanking in their delightful water feature. The lions in their vast and stately boredom. The apes making do. Infants dangling at their breasts like heavy medals. We are watching the giraffe wrap its grey tongue around a weeping child's arm when you ask me for a nature poem. I'm like, oof. I recite a documentary ode to traumatic educational television, the comic whiskered walruses in slow motion, lumbering over the cliffs, their bodies falling like sacks of wet meat, hurting until they stop. There's no pretty lyric for it, only drone footage imprinted on the eyelids. You and I do not deserve nature or poetry. No tusks, no flippers. My kind, at least, have earned nothing but bad debts since we crawled out of the sea. What do you want from the bloody nature poem anyway? A romance for the half-blind beasts, hunkered together out of desperation, not out of choice. So now you tell me you want me to make the world nice. To say one nice thing. Well, even if I were a universally beloved naturalist with a soothing colonial accent, narrating your behaviours in sympathetic detail, you would still want someone else. A runway judge to proclaim you foxy on a weekly basis. The next big thing, or a distinguished warrior to grip the back of your neck in silent approval. The slack-jawed tiger disregards us, pacing her perimeter into a muddy trench. Apparently they're not even soft, you say. You tuck 2 chopsticks under your top lip. You bark, you whistle, you groan. Some people stare at the walrus impression, but most don't look at you. They are purposefully not looking. But you are committed, flopping around, until you lie still on the ground by my feet, where I kick you gently until you stand up. There's some really depressing David Attenborough on Netflix. But for good reason. Which is why he's doing it. I really rate his work, using the things that I grew up with as these kind of pure and gorgeous images of the wonders of nature. And now it's like, oh yeah, it's we out here suffering, and it's up to us to do something about it. Here's a poem from the residency from recently where I was like, okay, I'm going to write a poem that's actually definitely about climate change and the imagery that we're coming to associate with the way that our world is now, which is, I guess, in a little more of a sincere yearning mode, but we'll see how it goes. It's called Dread Weather. Summer burns out on the highway verge like the husk of a stolen car. We inhale a small relief in the stale cologne odour of city rain. My hands have gathered against your body like fallen leaves. You sweat heavily in your sleep, while I'm plunging through my lucid blues, doom scrolling. Bushfire smoke a continent away casts wicked light from Capricorn to Pisces. The season's hot new look, pinned in stories, cute omens for hypersaturated brimstone, the blood-red sun and fuchsia moon. Yeah, baby, I hope you like this bad disc energy. Celestial bodies colluding behind the smoke screen. It's the aesthetic of the century. Smoky-eyed, our lashes smudged with charcoal, remnants of the flammable carbon offset forestry. The bats and birds come swooning from their trees, fluttering morsels adrift like biodegradable glitter. When we can bear to go outside, the rancid sky tastes metallic as old cherry cola. And when we reach up to touch our eyelids, our sockets have been inlaid with polished circlets of pink-dyed power to watch the rising mercury in bloom. And lastly from me, a slightly older poem that shows some of the writing that I started doing that was sort of addressing issues a little more directly for a landscape that I'm sure many of us will be familiar with. It's called Add Penetrant to Preferred Broadleaf Herbicide and Devastate the Wildflowers. An overabundance of lupins scours the Mackenzie country, scorched pestilent amid shallow rabbit digs and wildling pines, glacial sediment pigmenting lakes blue as the cyanide-spiked bliss balls we cull wallabies with, Ferrofeed 217, peanut butter classic. Local farmers are obligated to eliminate the lupins, although a few plant them on purpose, contentiously providing forage fodder for merino sheep in the high country. They're pretty, these weeds, deep-rooted and pernicious, shedding protein-rich seeds and a kind of shade that only other unwanteds can live beneath. In a car park on the shore of Lake Tekapo, the rabbit gets shot over and over again, yet will not die. A squad of amateur photographers lined up as the rabbit hustles into the lupin thicket, where I crouch low, unspotted by the throng, their lanyards and itineraries, to snap up unpopulated scenery in a picture I will not send you. Snow-capped peaks, etc., and of course the noxious pastel tapestry, a cheaply pixelated sunset, an aestheticized bruised. Plus, a rabbit that poses for me like warm taxidermy, half the sun cupped in its silky earlobe, blood vessels ignited petal pink. I expect the photo could win an award at the AMP show if they hadn't banned pictures of the stupid lupins, the lazy ease of such inconsiderate loveliness. The tour bus moves on. The rabbit and I remain. All humanity's accomplishments are due to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. Where it won't rain, we irrigate until the green believes us. Crop circles patrolled by centre pivots, unparching the lucerne, the clover, this false participation, the sun shower of effluent, rainbows glinting from the fine spray of shit. So much depends on whether the sheep are hungry enough to tolerate the taste of toxic alkaloids. As the lupins bloom out the summer in their splendid blushing colonies, both the planters of lupins and their weed-killer neighbours insist that nature should take its course. But they can't agree on what nature means. Conserving shriveled, unpalatable tussock or letting slip the lupine war on the landscape. Floral battalions. Whose thorns do you prefer, sweetbriar rosehip or madagauri? The lupins lend their purpleness to prose, and I am ill-equipped to be alone with the sentimental glut. Unearned emotions are too easy, picturesque, florid and fecund and phallic, all guzzle and loll, choking the riverbed with sex. Ovaries and stamens, orbicular pods, naked waxen stems, little pink hoods yielding like skin inside out, fallow on linens which still reek of cross-pollination, I suppose you could say. I haven't buried the hatchet. I am still swinging it in my splintered fist. I am building a tiny house with it in the Mackenzie country because I cannot live inside you. Meanwhile, the lupins ring out their bright disaster of seeds in the riverbed and propagate downstream. Woo!
Am I audible? Yeah. This is fine?
Ali's on it.
Oh, raise it up a bit. Sorry, I'm always scared of breaking the things, so I don't touch them. Kia ora? Kia ora, kia ora. Cool. I'm going to read one poem. It's got a lot of space, so don't clap at any point. because it won't be over. Where I got the idea of apart from for Papatuanuku. Listen. No, truly listen. It is her. In between the spaces of this poem, where the black lines of the sky crater into the light, at the base of every sound, at the center of all gravity, is everything she is, and was, and will be. A clenchedness, a tired cough, caught closing here. Hear her say, just be and awe and listen. Made of falling soil soft between great crevasses, the tectonic and the brush. Press yourself to the ground. Really listen. What is movement like now that she has had so long to stretch her own body outwards? It was either to stubbornly get mud all up the back of my legs, or it was that I kept my shoes on until the jams of my toes began to stink through my school socks. There was no in-between, bare feet and otherwise. I would sit in the backyard with my legs crossed like some memory of meditation transported from the television. The clothesline would creak before the wind. The green grass would tickle nervous lines onto the hairs growing. I would pull at one until the whole line of root gave, and stare at the patches of steam that pushed from the little concrete path that followed the murder of a whole colony of ants. Couldn't smell them like how I could smell them if and when I squeezed them into nothing between my finger and thumb. I guess he misses her, and vice versa. See the rain, see everything else, spinning on one foot inside of a dust mote seen in the reflection of a lonely shuttle making its escape to the edges of the night. Take picture. She gives us a whakapapa of shape, so unlike destruction. We all swim in her until birth and long after, like flowers turned upside down and stretching towards warmth. The fern is starting to dry out. The wur that saves us from mold extracts all moisture from the plant. I sit the dying thing on the cabinet next to my bed. I lie my head on the pillow and watch it shrivel. It's like writing about something like this makes my life feel important, but it also gives me a severe pressure in the gut I can't just think my way out of. The dehumidifier is on almost non-stop these days because of how damp our little unit gets. A constant whirring inside of me and out. Listen. Really fucking listen to her. She is getting ready to let go, and we know the names of the people who are forcing her hand. First and last, their pictures on the internet, each one a number and a face we can find eating dinner, retired into a wall of not talking to their family that they built a world of nothing for. The dull lamp lights shriveling up on electronic metal, the pipes and pipes and pipes of it, the shit we drive through. Let her take back what they have tried to steal. But the man in the suit is disappearing into fork clink through steak rarer than his wealth. Cinch that tie just a little closer to pinch at the neck. Maybe even a speck of blood pulling itself out and onto the fine cotton, onto the fine work of others, a minuscule globe the color of. Maybe the work of giving these bodies back to her would do enough to end the pain. In the night, I can hear cows grazing out in the paddocks, their low groans, some symbol of childhood. Each one will lift their tail to swat or relieve themselves. A memory of a farm and the way life was meant to be, plunging right into the earth. The handkerchiefs I kept in my pocket always deterred my bullies from checking once they felt the cold damp of my runny nose caught in the cloth. But listen, she is singing. An asphalt scream digging into the sides of mountains or dams, suffocating rivers into dwindle, its schist scatter, the wire trapped inside the throat of a bird, or such gargantuan rumbling as the sky torn out from the air, a real physical noise like the one coming out of my head or mouth as I read this poem out loud to my friends who are all in the same room behind glass, leaning fragile on desks, leaning back in chairs on scuffed carpet, a cool blue fading to white. Read these words out loud to my friends who are all in the same boat. Starts out as a metaphor, but we've seen how the water rises, and I'm holding a pen in my hand or barely holding on to anything. Oh, fuck, why? After all this, would you take me back? Or maybe it's a trick to suggest we ever left. I can hold a grain of sand in my mind's eye. It trembles in and out of focus. It creates a mountain of glass between my lids. I can almost hear the music of it, coming in hacked starts, wet fingerprints sprout, icicles stratifying notes, coming in singe of wind under wing. They assemble a choir to sing, their drone pushing to the edges of breath, until ragged glitch of exhale. I hold my hands over my ears and try not to feel it radiating out from my very bones. A homesickness that is gigantic, bigger than all our longing combined. Listen.
Thank you, Essa. That was gorgeous.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Wants to go? Eric? Eric, you're up next. Fantastic. Woo!
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou. Morning, everyone. When I was choosing poems to read for this, I think one of the things that I realized that I sort of unconsciously write about is it's a feature of climate change that I think is often not discussed. So, like, yes, we're ruining the world for ourselves, but biodiversity loss is like an enormous part of what is happening to the planet. If one species was being screwed over, it would be one thing, but when like hundreds of thousands of others, innocent parties, are being wronged, it's monstrous, it's an injustice, and it's awful. And I think that part of my motivation for writing specifically about climate is just this empathetic, sort of like, why the hell is this happening to all these other sentient beings that have no part in this? So I'm going to start with a poem called Activism, which is, so sometimes I'm asked, like, why do you bother? Like, why are you an activist? As opposed to just like a citizen who doesn't go out and like try to disrupt things. It's a poem about why I do this, and I guess I'll just read it. So, activism. When you try to explain what you're doing, you fall back on metaphors of animals in distress, going out in high winds to catch birds' eggs blown from nests. Oh, unlike essa, you can clap regularly for me. So thank you. But that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm like literally out there trying to like catch stuff that's being disrupted, being blown from branches. Crikey. Yes! Thank you, Michelle. This is the only poem I am going to read from this book, which, no pressure, but if anyone does not own a copy of There's No Place Like the Internet in Springtime and would like one, they are available at a very reasonable price where Ellie is pointing, so yes.
You can see me afterwards, friends.
Yes, and you don't have to, but if you do want to, it's not a bad book. This is called I Am an Animal Benefiting from Climate Change, which most animals are not. I actually wrote this near Loch Ness, which is, I guess the animal benefiting from climate change is a bit like the Loch Ness Monster. But anyway, I am an animal benefiting from climate change. Finally, these flippers, so clumsy out on the city's fissured, hummocky asphalt, will steer me gracefully. This skeleton, which I've worn inside these many years, which should have been supported from deep below by the black, dense, creatureless water of the abyssal zone, but which instead has waited and hindered me and limited me with my only compensation, thin air and some sunshine. This structure that was grown can now be useful. My helmeted crest of bone will frustrate all the desperate, fleeing predators who'd club me on the bonce and eat me at the curb. Not that the path from killing to eventually eating me is clear or possible. My skin, which rejects all touch and which has always pained me more than any other, though it hurt others too, is adamant, and neither now nor in future will it give or let pass. Because my body did not change or even adjust to change, the change adjusted to me. I lost one niche, confusion, and found another waiting. The only happy surprise is a sudden survival advantage. I can hardly give up that, and I don't mean to. Bye. The hot, wet climate suits my hot, wet brain. I'll remember all of you and what you meant to me when the fossils of inland seas return to the water again. Thank you. To be completely frank, so that's in the. I actually don't know if I like that poem that much anymore. It's a bit of a tough sell for an audience, if I'm honest. There will be more direct poems now. I think that's a very winning thing. You should be honest with your audience. I don't know if that goes over that well. Now I'm. Hopefully these go over well now, because otherwise I'm in trouble. This is a poem that I wrote after a climate change action that took place in Littleton Harbor. So we're basically the only country in the world that still imports phosphate from Western Sahara, which is basically Morocco. Just they have. It's a colonized place, and it's called blood phosphate. Like it's illegitimate, and Ravensdown is basically the only buyer of this stuff in the entire world. So this was it was an action that was we blockaded a cargo ship. Anyway, It's called There Is a Man Dancing on the Rudder of an Enormous Cargo Ship. Someone got up on the rudder of the ship and was literally doing a bit of a sort of jig. So yeah. There is a man dancing on the rudder of an enormous cargo ship, having arrived as part of a protest flotilla of kayaks and inflatables and paddle boards, a semi-cohesive squadron of possibility and guerrilla tactics that are half surprise party, half interview with the parole board. And his dancing is pretty good, not only for who he is, barefoot, bearded, handy with a hammer, white, but for what it means. It's sand thrown in the gears of an unethical industry. I mean, they're being pretty polite for waterborne protesters, but they're angry. And yeah, the police are hailing him from the quay, but this doesn't seem to be leading him towards any sudden doubts. He just doesn't seem to care. And isn't that what dancing is? Seeming not to care about the things you care about. How am I doing on time, Rebecca? One more? I would say this is climate change adjacent rather than specifically an environmental poem. It's about veganism. It's about not eating things. As I alluded to earlier, please let us not do harm to other creatures is my message. If you take anything away from me from this panel, it's leave other beings alone. And this was, seriously. And bloody hell, this was written before the nightmarish sinking of that live export ship in the typhoon. But this was a poem that I wrote after seeing a video of live export conditions, which are unpleasant. Anyway, it's called The Vegan Poem, or it's not a conversion narrative because I was already converted. Whatever you do, don't watch the shocking undercover video of how we treat the things we eat. It's all shit and squeals and pus and teats. When I watched the video, so you don't have to, I turned gray and shadow-beaten like a hill beset by gusty westerlies. I shriveled like fridge celery, leaking a long slick of sympathy. I willed myself through my anger, a crab plodding through treacle towards the crab-fighting ring. If I never do anything else, let me do no harm, I say in my best breathless ethicist voice. And I mean it, come hell or high water or a wasting disease. Today, once again, caring seems to be the less debilitating option. But it's hard to believe there's hope for any animal-affirming utopia when people even hate each other with the violence of a sneeze. Thank you.
Kia ora. Oh, this is a high stage. I like this. I was just enjoying hearing all my colleagues read. I was just kind of sitting on the comfy couch in a daze, and now I have to get up and read some poems. I'm a little bit upset about that. But hasn't everyone been wonderful? It's been so great. Fuck yeah. Clap for them. Clap for them, and then afterwards clap for me. I guess, so I've got a couple of poems. I'll do two, and then if we have time, maybe a fun one at the end. I guess for me, in terms of climate change writing, I've sort of I'm still kind of, I guess, learning how to talk about it. I think we all are, and it changes. And some are sort of direct, some are indirect, and I never feel like an expert on anything. And so I guess for me, it's how can I use sort of, I guess, my kind of, gifts or thoughts on that, and it's often results in really, really stupid stuff, or hopefully funny stuff, or absurd things. And I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed the most about this anthology already, is seeing all the submissions come in and see how everyone, regardless of who they are, uses their own voice, and it's kind of, they're not trying to write to a sort of subject matter as they are, it moves through them in a way, and I think that's one of the special things about this kind of thing. Anyway, I'll shut up and I'll read some poems. This first poem is going to be published in Rebecca's lovely journal, Sweet Mammalian, which is coming out soon. It's a really great journal. It's called DJ Got Us Fallen in Love Again by Usher plays in the club as the world burns. Hopefully. DJ Got Us Fallen in Love by Usher plays in the club as the world burns. But the DJ is disaster porn daddy Al Gore, blasting ear horns and I told you so's. And we're fallen in love with systemic industrial negligence. There's a seductive urgency to grind in synchronicity with the solar flares, to make out with unkempt oil lobbyists. So dance, dance, like it's, give us rainforest shot glasses and a big-ass smoke machine. Give us golden jet fuel showers, but not the sexy kind. Give us styrofoam songs written with kakapo feathered quills, dipped in the blood of an equally endangered, equally important native bird. Let us leave this whaleskin dance floor, retire to our respective dumpsters. The last night of... Recycling's hot, but so are we. We're 99% artificial colours, flavours and preservatives. We're the worst compost. Drag us to a man-made island, hack us into loving segments, let us decay unnaturally, leaching toxins and poor attitudes down the ocean's throat. Your life. Sometimes we're the garbage. Sometimes the real garbage is the friends we made along the way. Sometimes the friends we made along the way are stuffed in black bags, clumped broken in a broom closet, waiting for the bartender to take us out. Kia ora, thank you. Yay. We're all having fun and we're all enjoying poetry. It's great. I don't have a book out, but if you want, you can just buy Eric's book and then I'll just write my poems over his, and that's fine. I'll sign Eric's book. Yeah. Last time I did a reading with Eric, I threatened to call my book There's No Place Like the Internet in Autumn, and he didn't like that so much, but it's fine. Who here has been to Wellington before? Yeah. Capital of New Zealand. So there's a museum there called Te Papa. It's a brilliant museum. It's excellent. And there's a big squid there that's in like a big glass case. It's a big tentacly boy, and he's great. And I wrote a poem about him because that's the kind of shit I do. It's called Te Papa's Giant Squid Dreams of the Moana. School kids stare in awe and disgust. I've learnt more facts about my own history from science teachers. Giant soldiers mourn my captivity. The earthquake house shakes in disapproval. Docents wipe away rebellious fingerprints. Did you know the squid has 3 hearts and a donut-shaped brain? My ink is responsible for love notes in math class, complicated cafe orders, ratifying bilateral trade agreements. Are you reading this in hard copy, sweet saviour? If so, you're welcome. Once people have extracted everything from you that's special, they'll put you on display and tell the world how special you were. Like the Rugby Hall of Fame next door, where the 1985 All Blacks are kept in chains, destined to perpetually tackle each other into eternity or brain damage. I can't find my edges. I've forgotten my reach. Membrane liquefying an industrial brine. I'm just sinew floating in historically significant chowder. I think this quote is on the wall somewhere. Oh, it's over there. Yeah, that's my quote. And there, it's like, yeah. Anyway, the poem's still going. I shouldn't have broken it. That's fine. I'm just sinew floating in historically significant chowder. If you're reading this before 2040, there's still a chance. Take an e-scooter to the waterfront at midnight, break into my nature exhibit, pry open my oversized jar, let me Shawshank out of there, sliding back to my mother's grey embrace. If you're reading this after 2040, it's too late. She's already taken me back to Papa 2. Kia ora. Thank you. You're all very lucky. That was the first time I've read that poem before. No one's ever heard it before, not even me, because I didn't practice. But I think it was fine. I think it went well. And yeah, that's my quote over there. It's great. I love these quotes. They're so good. I've been enjoying a new one every time I look at the wall. Do I have time for another one? No? Okay. Sure. All right. So this next poem is, I guess, a bit more maybe performative, and maybe a bit more, I guess, like polemic, to take an S's word. It's good. I like it. It's called Why I Kidnapped NZYWF. People of Dunedin, I stand before you today accused of the most heinous of crimes. A crime so sinister, it goes against the founding legal documents of Aotearoa. Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Bill of Rights, the Edmunds Cookbook. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today accused of stealing the Prime Minister's baby. Now, there are a lot of salacious rumours out there about me that I'd like to clear up. Some people say that my theft is proof you can't be a fit parent and run this country, but the only proof of that I've ever seen are Max Keys DJ sets. Some people say I put her in a bunker with a tinfoil hat and Billy TK to protect her from the 5G towers. Some say David Seymour and I are raising her as our own, reading her Ayn Rand novels every night until we have our own little libertarian sleeper cell. These are all lies. Okay, yes, I did steal the Prime Minister's baby. But the truth is, I'm building a rocket ship and I'm taking her to Mars. Because by the year 2040, when she is 22 years old, the world as we know it will be completely, irreparably broken. There'll be widespread food and water shortages, extreme heat and drought will be common, and rising sea levels will swallow up your favorite grab-a-seat destinations. I am not a clean green person. I'm part of the problem. We're a society of hypocrites, and I'm no exception. On the way home from a climate change rally the other day, I bought caged meat and non-biodegradable plastic. I poured 10 litres of overpriced petrol into the Hutt River and punched 3 native birds for no reason. It's easy to ignore the abstract until it's staring you in the face, breathing carbon dioxide onto your skin. I feel its breath getting warmer. People all around me are getting pregnant, and on top of the usual fears I have about having less people in my life to look after me and take care of me, I'm worried for the future their kids will have. So yes, I stole the Prime Minister's baby. Because if we can't get people to care about the most famous kid in the history of Aotearoa, how do we get them to care about the rest? Kia ora, thank you all so much.
We've always got more time for your poems, Jordan. Every time. I think this is actually quite a good segue, Jordan, into talking about the way you often blend like really heavy-hitting topics like, you know, depression and toxic masculinity and crises of capitalism with like comedy, total like laugh out loud moments, and like, you know, your poems can be really like excruciating. Like in the best possible way. You got this like poem about like Catholic guilt describing God watching you jack it, and also you like sing Coldplay during. It's incredible. I hope it's like on the internet somewhere. So following you for like the rest of your life, the performance of that poem. But like but it's also about this really serious stuff, and these poems as well, blending your like delightful co-parenting with David Seymour. With like what the future will be like for Neve and people her age. How do you balance the push and pull of like really hard topics and comedy in a poem? And like how do you get the audience to like engage with some real shit without losing them completely?
I think it is a delicate balance for sure, and I think it probably comes from sort of doing, I guess, performance and trying to learn how to engage an audience, where you kind of have to use what's available to you, and like no one needs another like angry white guy getting up and being like, these are the issues of the world, I'm here to talk about them. So you need to do it in a way that's, I guess, authentic to you, and like for me it's being funny but also being real sad, And that's how I kind of think of it almost as a formula at times. So it's like my poems will be like funny, 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 sad, funny again, and then we all leave with a smile. But I think, yeah, for me it is just my way of, I guess, like a reason to get on stage and sort of feel like I'm actually saying something that's like true to me, but also might be useful for other people. And I think everyone has a different way of doing that. But yeah, it's a really delicate balance, but it's something that I think I really tried. I enjoy chasing it and seeing how it works. So it takes a lot of tweaking and a lot of missteps and public missteps. But sometimes, you know, you feel the Coldplay run through you, and you're like.
Man, I'm so sorry for describing that poem in so much detail, but also you should look it up. It's amazing. And this is something else as well, because you've really like honed your skills in the performance poetry world, like starting out and making it big in the slam scene, which is so cool. But also you're like really widely published in, you know, the notable journals of Aotearoa, and you've also started the most notable journal of 2020, Stasis, which is online. It's awesome. Oh, God. Again, look it up. Google Jordan. You'll find all the wonderful work that he's done. It's great. But there is often like a sense in the spoken word space where you've operated where there's a lot of concern about like social justice matters and like particularly people exploring their like identity, like personally, and discussing kind of social issues. And the genre is often seen as a space for like very individual, like personal poetry, and as well as community calls to action in various ways. How do you see like environmental issues being examined as well in that spoken word space?
I think you're seeing a lot more of it, and especially because I guess like spoken word is quite a youth-focused thing, and it's very like there's a lot of advocacy. Like it can be very like polemic in a way, and which can make it really good or make it awful. And I think we're seeing like I just think about like our editors group chat, and then someone will like stumble across like a video and be like, oh, there's this like young Auckland teen doing this amazing poem, and send it. And because I think of the nature of the medium, there's more of a tendency for it to be kind of, I guess, viral in a way, or widely shared. And I think seeing, this like kids kind of make craft these videos and craft these poems, which can be seen as a very direct response. And I think they can be really brilliant in a way. And it's just like, and I guess it's just like, this is good stuff.
Yeah, and it's a growing space depending on like the
absolutely,
yeah. And I think that's something that we're quite all, you know, mutually interested in, is like getting young writers submitting to this climate anthology as well. Like it's just so important for young people's voices to be heard in this space, and we're just here, even though we've just like read you heaps of our own poems, like we're here to provide it's an outlet for you. We're collating, you know, and celebrating other people's work. But I think in terms of discussing the things that we might be like interested in looking for, I'm interested in the thing that you just said about how sometimes work that's really kind of directly political can sink as well as land. And I'd love to like talk with everyone about how we think that works. How do you write a poem that like hits the right place without people going, oh my God, don't tell me what to do. Or whatever the response is that people have.
I'll just say that I think that the page is maybe more forgiving of work like that. Like, there are things that you wouldn't necessarily want to do for audiences because they would, they might in fact sink. But it's not less sincere or less worthy. But like they, as a private experience, I think some of those things work better, if that's a way to say it. What I would say, I'm not dissenting, I'm not like saying that we should all be writing stridently political stuff, because if you don't want to, it's not going to work. But if you do, and it's genuinely good poetry, it may not necessarily be the sort of thing that, it is not a poem like kidnapping Neve, like that but it might work between you and the reader, I think, is a way to put it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. The way things sort of behave on the page a little bit differently to in performance.
And of course, we are editing a print anthology,
yeah.
so
yeah,
and trying to capture the energy that comes out of things that are performed, but also acknowledging that there are other modes of writing, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's been really cool. Like, we've never all read together, the four of us, so this was actually really nice. Like, personally, just found as a chance to hang out. Like, we live in different cities. We haven't been in a room together the whole time we've been doing this project, pretty much. So it's awesome to be here for this. But also, we write in really different ways. Like, I'm doing my romantic, oops, everything's a love poem, little thing, just, earnestly trying to do beautiful things. And then, but like, we're all doing such different stuff, even ourselves, in trying to address these things. And we have these variations even within our own voices of when we're being more strident and political, or when we're kind of glancing off things, or just the issues that we're facing are just part of the world that we live in, so they make their way in ambiently. It's been really nice, and I think we would encourage, we're not looking for any specific kind of writing, because there are so many kinds of, it's very difficult. We've had a lot of questions about what we're looking for, and the question is like, almost everything. And then we'll have a really hard time whittling it down when we're selecting. But we do all have various sort of editorial experiences already. So I edit Sweet Mammalian, Jordan edits Stasis, Essa's edited various zine works and Mayhem as well, which is Waikato Journal, and Eric's been involved with Queen Mob's Tea House and Takahi more locally. And so we've all got some experience in that space. What do you all look for when you're selecting a poem? Even though we've just said we don't. Yeah. What is it that makes different poems striking to you, or how would you describe your experience?
Well, I don't know. My advice in regards to engaging with politics in poetry is that don't ever forget that you have a body. Don't ever forget that you have specific views on the world and the specific experiences of the world, because there's ways in which when you engage with these big ideas they get very broad, and you forget that your favorite ice cream is vanilla. I don't know why I'm saying that. But there's all sorts of things that you can bring into a political poem that can breathe life into it, because I think with poetry one of the real great things about it is it makes people feel things. And so I don't know, I like poems that make you feel something before making you think about something, which I think, this is going to be a really weird analogy, but if you stab someone, they're going to think about it afterwards.
Stab them with the poetry.
Fair.
Anyway, I think that's me.
We're talking about stabbing? What are we talking about? No, I think very similar to what Essa said, but maybe a different analogy.
Please.
I think, there is, don't ever forget, that you have a body, that you're a person, and you have, you're capable of original thought, and you're capable of writing things or saying things in a way that no one has before or no one will. And I think what I look for is that sort of specificity, maybe, and that sort of originality is such a cliched term, but in a way it's avoiding cliche, and I'm sure we'll read 100 poems about how Mother Earth is crying and we're wet in her tears, but there's ways of saying things in different ways, I think, and I really look for that, and I think, sort of touching on what Eric said before, there is, when you write, or when you write all with the expectation of other people reading it, you're sort of entering into a contract between the reader and yourself, and I think people who have an understanding of that and kind of cherish that and sort of treat that in a really respectful way often write brilliantly, I think. And I think when it can go wrong is when people maybe forget that. And it's a very hard thing to kind of be mindful of. But yeah, hopefully that sort of answers what I'm looking for.
Maybe a variation on what people have said. Everyone, we have bodies, but everyone's from a place. Everyone is from a literary tradition as well. Even if you think you're not, you are. So working within your specific sort of bit of society, your way of viewing things which may be political, it may not be explicitly political. So yeah, especially when we're talking about something like climate change, where frankly, like the message is not actually getting through. Like we know that there is a massive problem. People in power sort of say that they know that, but nothing that is actually being done reflects that. So writing from a place where you are acknowledging things that you know to be true, that you feel need to be reiterated to people, is, I think, something that I value. And I know that could lead you into, like, lead you down the garden path of writing cliche, you know, please listen to me, I know the truth. But frankly, like, we are living in a world where truth is, like, apparently, like, not something we can take for granted. Yeah. And as writers, being on the side of what is true to you and the world is something that I like massively value, and people who can express that in ways that are exciting are the writers that I really like.
Yeah, that is all such good stuff, and it sort of boils down as well to this kind of this climate change has become a really ideological issue, like debating the science of it as part of this like big war of truth that we're saying, and people take stances on it based on a lot of other things that they believe in as well. That makes it really difficult. And as well, climate change is this sort of very abstract seeming issue in a lot of ways. Even though we're materially seeing it happening, and it comes from actual things, big and small things that are being done on purpose and accidentally, like every day. I think connecting this to actual lives and to anchoring specific detail about what life looks like with this is something that does help with writing poems that like both engage you with this issue but aren't just kind of this big, very general sort of flag waving around the abstraction. And the other thing about like, we all have our own lives and our own places and our unique experiences, and even if your like normal life is of interest as well, it's like anchoring, it's just like details that are already around you can do a lot to give a poem some concreteness that helps you deal with sort of bigger things as well. And that's not just a climate thing, I think it's in general.
Yeah.
Helps.
Yeah. Just a good tip. Just handy tips.
Top tips from the editors. Essa, I was going to ask you a question about... Sorry.
You're going to say something stupid like stab people?
Well, I'm also interested in how you use, along with like concrete detail from real lives, a lot of like mythic and like legendary figures in your own writing, and you do these like amazing, like sexy, queer, like indigenous retellings of like stories from all over the place, like Virginia Woolf's Orlando, or Echidna, the like Greek mother of all monsters, or returning to like Papantuanuku. And so I'm interested in how you use myth and like explore these figures through your writing, and like part of why you do that.
I guess it's like trying to trace a whakapapa of queerness in a way. In my book Ransack, I write a whole lot of letters to a character called Orlando, from Virginia Woolf's book Orlando, which I actually first saw as a play that my friends put on, and the person who played Orlando was a Māori woman, and I don't think it ever makes it into the book, that detail, but I felt like there's this like kind of reclamation of like queer Māori identity, or takitapuitanga, and I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of in our oral history, there's just like a lot of spin, like when a different person tells a story, it means a different thing to them, and it has a different cultural context. So I want to be someone who's doing something like that for, I don't know, for people to read in the future, but also like for now. Yeah, and being like there's queerness everywhere, and trans people have been here since the start of time. And I like just pushing on those ideas.
Yeah. And actually and a lot of your writing is about queerness and like exploring ways of being in like trans and takatapui bodies. And do you see like a relationship between like queer writing and nature and environmental concerns as well?
Well, yeah, everything's connected. I don't know. I think just yes. Like I think what I was saying earlier. We exist in the world, and the world is, responding in a certain way to like the dominant systems that exist on it, like colonization and capitalism are these like kind of massive forces that are kind of that affect us in so many different ways, and it interacts with like your identity constantly. Be it like class or along gender lines, or I don't know. I feel like is it responsible to think anything's kind of separated, or like in these kind of like pockets disconnected from each other.
It's true. Any other? Yeah, it's like poems are about lots of things at once, right? Like that's part of the richness of reading and writing them. It's like it's not just here's my one topic, which is somehow siloed off from the rest of the world. So that's a good point. Well, Eric, you in your writing have like a strong eye for detail when it comes to like science and history and infrastructure as a way of like creating some sort of concreteness and
all the exciting topics. Infrastructure. Write poems about infrastructure, people. That's what gets you the prizes.
You've got like
Actually do though. I love this.
the electrification of cities, and it's like it's the stuff that makes up our lives, that makes different kinds of lives over time. Like it's such a rich area to mine, and I was interested in like how you came to do that, like but get really interested in these like historical places and things. What draws you to writing about that kind of stuff?
Well, for a start, maybe I should give a potted history of my writing. Like everyone else, I started writing angsty poems, and then I realized those were awful, and eventually graduated to writing less personal things because, frankly, I feel like I'm more qualified to talk about things other than myself because I'm, if that makes any sense. As far as history goes, Rebecca's giving me too much credit as a writer about science, I would say. But in terms of history, I've always been interested in where I come from, where my culture has come from, where the world has come from. It's very difficult for me to imagine not writing with like an eye towards history. not sure, but is there anything else I could sort of use to make a better answer to this question?
Well, I think it sort of goes back to your interest in, like, truth as well, what you were talking about before, like this kind of taking down the facts. I think is something that, but like it really still like pops, and it, the factual and the emotional balance quite well. Well, the way you use facts to create emotive situations is really.
I should say, before my first book, I wrote a chapbook, which was called 26 Factitians, and they're prose poems that were guided by a number of constraints, one of which was that they all had to mention a proper noun place, so they're all like rooted in place. I have thought of something that I think makes a better answer, which is that, so I'm from the US originally, which you may detect from my accent, but my father's Scottish, and so I actually think that unconsciously, a lot of what I've done is, people who don't know me will think I'm like British, like a British poet, and I think that part of what I'm actually doing, maybe a little unconsciously, is like, it's sort of like post-colonial sort of like understanding what the British Empire has sort of done everywhere, and like, so like, yeah, I don't write about all history, because that would be irresponsible, and I don't know anything about all history, but in terms of like the history that sort of has produced me, I feel like it would be unbelievably irresponsible to not sort of address all that. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a better answer.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. And I think the thing about like writing from where you're from is something that we're exploring quite a lot in this conversation here as well. But I mean, when it comes to like writing about environmental issues and writing about place, we can't talk about, this anthology without talking about like Māori writing in particular. And I was wondering, Essa, if you had anything in particular to say about what you see happening in like Indigenous poetry at the moment and how Māori writers are responding to climate issues.
In a lot of different ways, I think. As we're not gonna sit here and make a monolith out of us. But like, I don't know. There's the concern with the land is always there because it's something that was stolen and hasn't been returned. And so that concern is very clear. Like the kind of conflation of like land rights and also like the kind of fight against against climate catastrophe that is caused by what is it? Is a certain percentage of companies are responsible for?
The top 100 companies are responsible for like 70% of all emissions.
Yeah. And so there's this I think innate connection between Indigenous struggle for sovereignty and the fight against global warming and I feel like there's just a lot of really cool different things that are happening. I think was it the Indigenous journal Tupuranga launched the second issue.
That's right.
Today or yesterday. So I'd definitely check that out for like a kind of a glimpse into what people are doing right now in their writing. And I think it's just incredibly important that we have Māori writing in this book. Because like it's such a personal thing, and also like part of I think part of honouring Te Tiriti is publishing our work, which a lot of people seem to forget in terms of people in gatekeeping positions. No shade thrown.
Some shade thrown.
Some shade.
A certain amount of shade.
I think that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Well, it's the kind of thing, it's like, yeah, Māori voices are so crucial to this project. So please send us your work, because we really want to hear from you.
Should I also just chime in and mention, so I mean, I'm not Pacifica, but I've always thought that Pacific writing had to be part of this because like that is the front line of climate change. And so, I mean, using contacts that I have, I've made sure that at least we're getting people submitting. It is crucial as well. Just
Oh, sorry.
no, it's just it's a different sort of, because it's not the issues are not the same. We're talking about like a kind of a loss that is like we can all see it happening, but nothing is being done to address it, which is the most horrible feeling in the, like, that is climate change all over, but like when it's where you're from and you know it's sort of baked in that like there are places that are going to disappear, and if for no other reason, we really need to have a record of writing from places that are facing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's something that the Māori scholar Alice Tepunga Somerville often talks about, is that if the solution's going to come from anywhere, it's going to come from Pacific peoples.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the problem is right on the doorstep there. And I think that's something to, I don't know, I think remember. And I think we're all going to have to, you know, like remember as we're selecting pieces. Like not just like looking at like the kind of perhaps fatalist view that we're all kind of screwed, but then also looking at like the potential ways out of this, and shining a light on that.
Yeah, I think this is a good segue into some of the things that we might be interested in. You know, the opportunities there are for people to write in different ways towards this project. So it's not all like the sky is falling and it sucks.
It is, though.
There's also this sort of language of apocalypse is not very useful, right? A lot of the time it makes it seem like there's this inevitability when like really there's all things that we can do and there are all solutions that we can offer. And I think, that
Apocalypse also gives this idea of like a cut-off date where everything's all lost, when it's actually going to be like an ongoing process for many years.
Yeah. And so I think for me, I'm really going to be looking out for like sort of solutions, but I'm not saying like you have to like fix climate change.
Are you saying poetry can solve climate change, Rebecca? Is that what you're saying?
By the way, if you do know how to fix it, please do send us that work.
We're all out of ideas.
We would be very grateful, and we will forward it to the IPCC.
Yeah, that's right. But you know, we're looking for like a range of feelings, and also like being like bleak about it. It was also totally, you know,
it's valid.
We all love bleak poems. We're poets. It's part and parcel. You know, we've all had our little agonies.
Ultimately.
And you know, Eric might have grown out of his angst phase, but I'm still writing mine, putting it in public, which is great for me. So, what else are you guys interested in, and like work for the anthology, and like, is there anything that particularly piques your interest about like climate writing now, or is there anything like about the role of the anthology that sort of in the world?
Sorry, I'll just jump in. Is it okay? You go?
You go.
Okay.
You've said more words.
I've said some words. And it's actually building on what Essa said before. I think that it's more and more like the acknowledgement of everything is connected, and like how complicit we all are, and how complicit colonialism is, and like as a result capitalism, and kind of like acknowledgements of these structures that have led to a significant amount of this. And whether you look at that on sort of like a granular level, whether it's like something that's very specific to you and your place, or at a higher level, I think that's what I want to see a lot of, and that's why it's important that we have obviously Māori voices and also Pacifica voices, is to, I guess, interrogate and sort of pick apart those harmful structures that, you know, have not been interrogated in the mainstream as much as they should have been, and, you know, are very entrenched now in the way we live and are harmful in very widespread ways, and specifically, like, you know, with the environment and with the sort of the loss of, you know, rangatiratanga and kaitiakitanga, and sort of the kind of bulldozer of late stage capitalism coming through. And I'd also like some poems about, like, you know, the guillotine and maybe CEOs being hung from buildings. Anyway, that's just me. It's just stuff I like.
Yeah, if you can sneak a death threat into your poems.
Yeah.
That might.
I can see like AUP's like breast team frantically calling their lawyers at the moment.
Yeah, prepare to lawyer up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I read a really weird essay. It was about like bad sex and climate change. So I think, I don't know, I want to read something about good sex and climate change.
Yeah.
Keep saying things.
At least you didn't stab anyone in this one.
I already said the stabbing thing, Becca. We can't put it back in the bottle.
I'll just say that, so when we were pitching this project, one publisher was, they kind of thought it should be like a sort of dispassionate survey of the state of literature on the issue. And I don't actually agree that it should be that. I'm speaking personally, not for everyone. I actually think that there is a role to be played by artists in being, like, basically activists. Like, because it's absurd to think that this could just be like, oh, this is how we all felt in 2020. If we're looking at this in 2050, oh, this is what everyone thought then. No, well, yeah, but also, this is what people wanted to get done. This is what people wanted to... So, like, I actually think that there's... Look, I'm not under any illusions that poetry actually changes anything. Sorry, that's on video. No, it does not necessarily change anything. I wish it did, but we can pretend that it does, and write as if it's going to change things, I guess is how I would... And in fact, if there's anything that I look for in writing, it's writing that is under the illusion that it can change things.
Yeah. And I think a part of that is reflecting what's going on with young people today, and the activism, the leadership we're seeing, and, like, art imitates life in that respect, and we want that reflected, and sort of that activism is a massively important part of it. And even though we're all, like, sort of, you know, insincere, like, kind of irony-soaked sort of millennials or Gen Xers up here, like, we want to reflect...
I'm not a Gen Xer.
What are you?
Lord.
What are you?
I'm the oldest millennial.
The oldest millennial.
Well, I'm a millennial Zoomer cusp, so...
But we want that reflected. We want that activism, we want that leadership and that hope and that sort of that fire that is within the young people, like, reflected, I think.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, like, big shout out to, like, School Strike for Climate.
Yeah,
which is, like, massively important. Like, just incredibly important. Like, probably the single most important climate activist movement, in my opinion.
Yeah. Amazing. I think we've been talking at you for long enough. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to fire them at any of us, at all of us. Go nuts. I'll give you a moment to think about it.
They can be dumb questions as well.
Yeah, the dumber the better.
I like saying dumb things in response.
Yeah. Ali's got a microphone if we need a mic as well. Someone please ask a question. Nathan's got a question.
So the origins of the climate poetry anthology, whose initial idea was it, and who, or why that? Not in terms of why that thematic, but why that with this group of people?
I guess I have to answer. So it was, first of all, I mean, it's not about, like, it's not anyone's baby. Like it's all of our thing. We're all doing this. I guess, but it was something that I thought needed to happen for like since like I don't know 2018. If you haven't been radicalized since 2016, there's something wrong with you. So yeah, like it was something that I was just like, okay, I know that there are people writing about this, including me. Surely this is something that should be collected. I guess like in terms of origin stories then, I knew that I wanted to, if this was going to happen, I wanted to have Rebecca as one of the people because I really am a big fan of Rebecca's writing. And Jordan and I talked at the National Poetry Slam last year about this whole thing, and then we sort of got a messenger chat going, and then it sort of just coalesced from there. Why this group of people? 4 people is an unusually large number of editors. I think everyone acknowledges that. But I genuinely think we all bring something specific to this. So like, we have different sort of communities that we're a part of. It's not like we're not part of the same community, but like we all sort of tap into different networks. As you will have gathered from hearing us read, we all have, we're not the same sort of writers, I wouldn't say. And I would be skeptical of this working as well without any one of us. I genuinely think that like we would be missing stuff that I believe is going to be in the finished book. So, but that, I shouldn't be the only one answering this question.
I think we can cut Eric and it'll be fine, but it's just... No, I agree 100% with what Eric said.
Oh my God, there was an actual stabbing.
Yes. That's what it looks like to be shanked on stage by a friend.
Love you.
Live for the drama. I actually should say as well a little bit of detail about if you want to send us work for the anthology, in case I forget and we end this whole thing, which is to like please send up to 5 poems to climatechangepoetry@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook if you search Aotearoa Climate Change Poetry Anthology. I know it's a lot of words. You'll get it'll come up. It's there.
I'll send you a pre-formatted response.
Yeah. We weren't able to like boost our post because Facebook has decided that it's like too political, which was interesting. They categorize it as like a political ad, and you have to do all this like identity proving. It's incredible. So, but we're there, and like please send us anything you've got. And it's like it can also be previously published work. This is something we want to make clear. It doesn't need to be hot and fresh out of the oven because it's in anthology and things, and it's in print in the like university press industrial complex. It's all great. So yeah, and we're able to pay our writers as well, which is something that's very important to all of us. There's varying degrees of struggling artiste, so it's great to be able to offer that as well. Anyway,
I guess like if you have friends that might also be interested, or if you're involved in certain communities or schools or anything, and you want to share that around, that would really help as well. We're trying to get it as wide as possible. Or if you want like some promo stuff, you can like just send us an email, or if you need like any resources, and we will be as helpful as possible until the submission deadline, which is
5th of October. Yeah, so coming up fast, and we'll have a huge amount of reading to do, which is very exciting.
It's exciting.
Please give us more. We want to be overwhelmed with your poems.
I really understand that the focus of the anthology is from youth, like it makes sense. But some of us older people who we might be writing are really, really so strongly motivated on environmental issues for the sake of this generation who's too young to write yet, but will you be sort of open to entries from...
There's no
from
age
all-
limit
Oh,
at
there's
all.
no age.
Like,
Yeah, I would say perhaps because of the audience that is like we might be emphasizing that more than is like it is not in any sense age limited. It's like this is happening to all of us. Yeah, and also it's worth acknowledging, like as a kind of climate change as a sort of subject is. Eco-poetry existed before this. It's not like we're inventing this. We're not, it's not, there's a tradition that we're already operating in that people have been writing in and about for
And when we were first
a
sort
long
of
time.
brainstorming like people who we may want to shoulder tap or people we'd hope to submit, a lot of them were sort of like older writers or more historical writers who wrote eco-poetry, and it was sort of the foundations kind of a lot of the poetic tradition now. So yeah, I guess this talk is very age focused because we're at a Young Writers Festival, but we want everybody. So please send us your stuff. Yeah.
Oh, Mike's coming.
Oh, thank you. It's kind of just to you because of what you said, and I don't want to be challenging. I'm not trying to be aggressive, but if you really think that poetry doesn't make a difference, then what's the point of the anthology? And what's the point
That's a
of
good question.
writing? What's the point of being an activist with poetry if you don't actually believe it accomplishes anything?
That's the most frightening question
I'm
anyone
so
can ask.
sorry.
Why do you write poetry
I'm a big
if you
fan,
know that
by
it's...
the way, I don't mean to
No,
I'm
no,
not
no.
trying to be rude.
I am not.
It was
It's
just,
a good
it
question.
just
It's
was,
a really good
and my
question.
Hold
heart
people
is
to
like in
account.
my throat as I ask this, but just because it's a bit of a, obviously it's such a touchy, it's the world that we all live in, and it's something we all have to think about. Obviously everyone here cares about the environment, that's why we're here. So it can feel a bit hopeless to hear someone who does this work say like, you know, I'm not under the illusion that poetry actually changes anything.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
first of all, I want to acknowledge that, like, that's actually a very important thing to say. Yeah, I wouldn't want people to come away from this feeling hopeless. If I really thought that nothing could be changed, I would just be a nihilist. I would just not do anything, right? Surely? It's one of those glib poetry things where you acknowledge the sort of relative insignificance of the art in a kind of like massive scale. No, I don't think it does nothing. And in fact, I actually, I have hopes that this book will make an impact. And not just here, but because there is you know, a community of writers and readers who think that talking about the environment is important. I believe that it will make an impact elsewhere in the Anglophone world. Britain and the US both have, you know, communities of readers and writers that care about this. I guess what I would... Also, maybe other people can jump in on this at some point.
I'd like to jump in.
Yeah.
It's such a good question, and I think
is a good question.
So we got CNZ funding recently, and in that process, we had to get letters of support from people, and we were lucky to get one from the Climate Change Commissioner, Rod Carr, who I know, and he's got like sort of a background of like being a very hardened, like economic focused like banker, and we had a really good talk one night, and he was telling me about how the Climate Change Commission is exploring the use of art and the use of story and narrative as a way of communicating the message of climate change, because like the facts aren't getting through to people, science isn't getting through to people, no one gives a fuck, and they're at a wit's end. And so it was such a bizarre experience to have like the Climate Change Commissioner be like, can poetry help? You know, like can we, if nothing else, communicate messages and engage people in a way that you can't otherwise, because that's like the medium is the message in that respect. And to hear that from like this is something that the Commission is thinking about, and acknowledging that not only does it have a place, but it can be helpful. and that they're actively looking to explore how art can be helpful, and I think this will hopefully be one of the little ways. Yeah, hopefully that helps answer. Yeah.
If I could just add one other thing that I've thought of, I would say that in a kind of like immediate sort of policy-driven way, unlikely that art necessarily does things, but in a sort of longer time scale, I think that poetry absolutely changes narratives. So like any time, you know, like The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats is like quoted all the time for a reason. Like it's an evergreen statement about authoritarianism, essentially. I believe that poetry about the environment, about the grief we feel, the worry, the powerlessness, that statements made in poetry about that, I believe, will have an impact, you know, in down the years. Maybe that's, yeah. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, as Shelley said. That kind of thing, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in too, because I feel like maybe we haven't been like the hype beasts for the book that we could be, because we're so into, like, obviously we believe in it. We're here, we've like come all this way, and it is so important to explain why this matters rather than take for granted that like everyone already understands that it does, right? This collect a lot of different voices speaking to shared concerns that people across this country have, which is like so important to do. It's a public sphere thing. It's a really crucial kind of like between art and sort of journalism thing. It'll get media attention, which is another way of looking at these issues. And you know, there's so much to be said about the role of art in activism, as well as it being this sort of matter of record of this time and place and who people are and how they think and feel in this time. Bringing people together, like in a community sense, through the book, connecting artists with each other and like their, you know, friends and families and curious colleagues at work who don't sort of understand why people are still writing poetry that doesn't rhyme in this day and age. But you know, it will be out there. The number of people is important, and it's going to be a big, juicy book. It's, you know, it's because there's so much good poetry to include. Juicy. And you know, uplifting and distressing and all the things that will happen in it, because like poetry is moving. Like you didn't sit there and like tolerate us standing on our wee podium, bored, witless for like the whole time we were up there. I presume like at some stage you like experienced something you like in there. And it's like, you know, you don't need to like love every poem, but it's because this will be a big juicy, like there will be something for almost every reader. I can, you know, no guarantees, I disclaim, but you know, there's just going to be so much in this book, and that in policy, real life policy is about hearts and minds. It's people's feelings. It's people's like what they fear and what they love, like people's like selfishness, but also their like altruism and their care for other people and their empathy. So like it matters so much to do this work. It's just, anyway, that's my speech. I hope that's helped. Yeah?
In thinking about reading this anthology eventually, I'm really hungry for hearing people imagining how they want the world to be, how it will be living in the world in 40 years and 20 years. And I really hope that you get some submissions with kind of imagining how things could go well, or like how it could be to be alive in 20 years. Because, yeah, I think that can be really powerful and energizing and enabling, reading people's ideas, people's imaginations, as well as, I know it's really important to have yeah, criticism on the state of things. And yeah, so I am really excited to what you guys find and what people send in. Cool. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really agree with that. The kind of the positive radical imagination, I think, could be used a lot more in art and poetry. And yeah, I also hope that we get stuff that gives us ways forward.
Yeah, because you don't convince a lot of people by saying everything sucks and the world is ending, right? Like that doesn't, even if people believe you and, understand the facts of the situation and things, it can go in the too hard basket of, and also that, the imagination limits of the apocalypse rather than think, like this is such a future focused book, really, because it's about people not just looking at what's happening now, but the sort of apprehensions that we have. So yeah, that's such a great point to make. Thank you.
And you know what? If the pandemic shows us anything, it's that, frankly, like the state of affairs that we consider normal could be changed tomorrow if we wanted to.
There's capacity for
and
that
like,
change.
yeah, like it's actually really worth acknowledging that, and more writing that acknowledges that, like, we don't have to be sleepwalking into this nightmare. Like it can actually change. It's just, it feels like it can't sometimes because of forces, capitalism, etc. But it actually is not, it is not written that it has to be that way. And yeah, I agree, as like writing that uses the power of the imagination to imagine, things being better that's a tonic. That would be wonderful. Yeah.
There's your writing prompt. Go write it.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand up because I'm sitting on the ground. This also isn't particularly a question, but as a member of youth communities, I just want to say, great that it's open to those older than me, but also the fact that there is a space that is opening up to youth voices, especially as we're kind of demanding to be heard more and more. The fact that we're given more space as well, I think is really important to acknowledge, especially in writing circles where often journals will have age limits of 16 or 18, and as someone who should actually be in high school right now, thank you very much.
So I had a question a little while back, but then Rebecca answered it, which was great, yeah. But I wanted to follow up on something that Eric was saying when he was answering the very difficult question from the middle of the room. And it was more a question around, if you're creating an anthology, it's a collection of works, right? And it's a collection of voices. And I guess now what I'm going to say is less a question, but more, I'm helping Eric out here. Because from my own experience, if you're pulling together an anthology, you actually carry an enormous amount of responsibility, because what you're doing is you are creating a community. And I'm really excited for myself to see how this, Eric can say sort of jokingly, well, one poem maybe isn't going to change the world, but actually one poem can. But certainly a collection of poems can make a huge difference, because it's a community and it's a collection of voices. And nowhere else has this collection of voices appeared except for here, what you're doing. And I think that's tremendously important. So originally that was a question, because I wanted to ask you about the community that you're forming, but I think that's what you're doing. And I think that is very powerful. I think that's activism. You're creating a community in poetry.
And I think as well, thank you. There is this kind of trend to be sort of cute and self-deprecating in poetry, which often we stab ourselves right in the nuts. They're like, please listen to me, but also don't, maybe. You do you. Because people have a lot of preconceived ideas about poetry from being taught to me, World War II sort of bits and pieces at primary school, and then not engaging with it since then. But and so we can get a little down on, you know, the readership. But as you see from like these incredible like viral videos of like spoken word poets, like in like, Ranapiri sharing their stories, and so it's just like incredible what happens. And like poems do move people, and they don't necessarily, even if you aren't sure about, you know, the breadth of the readership or whatever. It's like if one poem can move one person just a little bit, that matters. And if you've got a lot of poems from a lot of people and for a lot of people, then that matters too. Do we have any more questions? I think we're starting to get low on time. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us 2 whole hours of your lives.
That's so long.
Thank you heaps. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in online. I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the festival. Please send us your poems.
Yes. Cool.
Great. Genuinely, thank you.